last half century has brought some fundamental changes to the sport of thoroughbred horse racing, and not all of it has benefited Epsom. Epsom is, of course, the home of the Investec Derby and the Investec Oaks, and several other races belonging to the pages of history. In fact, it is the holy grail of thoroughbred horse racing. If you speak to the managing director of the Investec Group, Bernard Cantor, he will tell you that the Investec Oaks have been around a very long time. In fact, since 1779. And the story we are here to tell is that of Epsom trainer Simon DOW, a passionately committed and dedicated man who has lived in the Epsom area for over 30 years. To anyone who would care to listen, Simon DOW would tell you that the horse population on Epsom Downs has decreased dramatically in the last half century. Horse racing is a game of numbers, and with the reduction of numbers in this particular area, there is an obvious decline in performance. There are no Derby winners being trained here at the moment, though Epsom-trained horses continue to do well. The key to successful training is having quality gallops on hand, and these, Simon is proud to tell you, have never been better at Epsom. People often forget that the Downs are owned by the racecourse, who in turn own some of the most valuable real estate on the planet. Today happens to be the day succeeding the Investec Derby. The Investec Derby run at Epsom Downs, the most famous flat race of all time. And as you will have noticed, the strength came from Ireland as far as the Investec Derby was concerned. Aidan O'Brien winning his third consecutive Derby. The Oaks is won by John Gosden, who trains up at Newmarket, and there was lots of other strength from trainers like John Ox, trainers like Dermot Weld, trainers like Andrew Balding. Most of these trainers, as far as England is concerned, train at Lambourne or at Newmarket, sometimes as far as the north, like Mark Johnson, for example. But isn't it quite ironic that the strength of racing at Epsom is very weak, relatively speaking? There were very few horses that participated on Investec Derby Day, or Investec Oaks Day for that matter, that are trained in Epsom. And we've caught up with one of the senior trainers, a guy who's been involved for many, many years, very actively involved in the Downs, and his name just happens to be Simon DOW. And we're going to talk to him about the history of his operation and exactly why he thinks horse racing is not as strong in the Epsom area as it is in other parts of England.
I think even as a schoolboy I can remember riding ponies on the Downs on the permitted hack rides, and coincidentally I finished up helping at a local stables where the proprietor had been a national hunt jockey and had served his entire apprenticeship and subsequent training career in Epsom, and sort of stayed on there and gradually got bitten by the bug. And you know what horse racing is like, it's quite addictive. And at the age I was 14, racing was the equine discipline that suited my temperament and my views about the horse world generally best.
Simon, there seems to have been a paradigm shift of the horse population that was prevalent in the 60s, 70s, that were trained in the Epsom Downs area as opposed to other jurisdictions, and that to me is one of the greatest anomalies of the most famous thoroughbred horse race in the world.
40 years ago, there's probably the same number. In the sort of late 1960s, there would have been the same number of horses in training in Epsom as there were in Newmarket. And the Downs was owned by a great man called Stanley Wootton, who, or the majority of the training grounds were owned by him, and he was a trainer himself. He left the Downs in perpetuity to the racecourse and effectively safeguarded horse training on Epsom Downs for the future. In the late 70s, the arrival of the Arab families and their wish to develop their racehorse ownership interest in the UK, which was, of course, the centre of world horse racing. But Prince Khalid Abdullah, who, of course, founded Jubmont Farms, and Prince Fahd Salman, who's probably best known for his on the racecourse for generous winning the Derby and the many horses that he had in training. Both of them had their very first horses. They were both clients of the British Bloodstock Association, and they had their first horses trained with Ron Smythe in Epsom in the late 60s and early 70s. And history then shows how they've gone on to influence the world racing scene. So I suppose there was an opportunity at one stage for the Arab families to very much base themselves here, but history tells us that for whatever reasons they moved to Newmarket and developed there. Epsom is, as you know, a good stone's throw from the centre of London, and as the suburban sprawl has drifted our way, many of our training bases, which were closer to Epsom and closer to the town centre, have been lost to the developers. And indeed, in just the same way as many people in England got hugely wealthy through the increase in property prices in the 70s and 80s, many trainers were not in a position to sell their yard on to stay in horse racing. They sold their yards on to build flats and lovely houses. And so the number of stables that we had to use, both individual boxes and actual training yards, was quite reduced, quite dramatically so, because of the land prices.
What I found absolutely incredible was even on Derby Day, I saw the general public walking on the downs, and it's intriguing to know what sort of rights they've got as opposed to licensed trainers.
There's a lot of politics involved, and we could devote a whole hour to just talking about the rights of the multi-users of Epsom Downs, and Epsom Downs incorporates the training grounds. It would be probably the only training centre in probably Europe where the public have this as much right of air and exercise close to the proximity of the gallops, and indeed over the gallops once they're shut. One would imagine that this is to the detriment of a training centre, but actually well managed as it is, and carefully preserved as it is by the dedicated conservators who administrate the Parliamentary Act which relates to the use of Epsom Downs. It actually works really well, and you get horses who are trained in quite a sterile, thoroughbred-only environment, as we've all seen all over the world. In Epsom, horses get to see a slightly different way of life, and that suits some horses and not others, but the vast majority of them. Epsom is horse racing, certainly in the UK, Epsom Downs is horse racing's best-kept secret. And although the critical mass of horses which could be trained on the Downs because of the urbanisation, in other words, the number of current training yards which are available for trainers to use, although because the critical mass is well below what it would have been in the late 70s or 80s, we still are able to show an acceptable business churn when it comes to the costs of administrating the training centre against the amount of money that we have coming in. And that churn shows enough of a profit for us to continue, or the Training Grounds Management Board, which is a subsidiary company of the racecourse who own the Downs and the Gallops, it continually allows us to invest in the training centre and improve the facilities and modernise them at the same rate as you would expect to see in anywhere in the world. I think also the important thing to remember is that pro rata, the number of winners that Epsom trainers achieve on an annual basis, would be hugely competitive per number of winners with anywhere else, and we've got to go back to the late 90s to find the likes of Lake Coniston, the likes of Heath Golf Rose. I had a horse called Young Ern, three Urban Request of Reg Acre, so we're all international horses, they're all international travellers, they all won group races all over the world. Heath Golf Rose won the Abbey as well, you know. And at the same time, Reg Acres, who trained Urgent Request as well, was training hundreds of winners over jumps as well. You know, it's amazing what can come off these downs here. And of course, yeah, we go back in history, as you say, the origins of the sport are on the very downs themselves. And you know, the history books tell us of all the wonderful horses that have been trained here. The key for my colleagues and myself going into the future is to ensure that we turn over every stone in order to demonstrate to potential owners the benefits of having a horse in training, so that we can just increase that number that we have, all of us, and we all work very closely together to ensure that occurs, so it gives ourselves the best chance of coming across a star, because as you know, you can do the job really, really right, you've got to kiss a lot of frogs to find the princes.
Simon, how do you explain the relatively paltry participation of Epsom trainers as far as Epsom Oaks and Derby Day were concerned respectively, when you look at the amount of people that come from Newmarket, from Ireland, from Lambourne, from even Andrew Balding's way up near Newbury? It's a very, very strange phenomenon as far as we're concerned.
It is. I mean, not only is it really difficult to get a horse of the calibre who stands the preparation to get to the race day, and we all know, any of us who've ever trained a horse of any description, whether it's a racehorse or a show jumper or an eventer, or to get the horse absolutely bang on the day is a challenge in itself. But not only is there the issue of the horses that have got the most ability, there's also the issue of the horses who have enough maturity, because the Oaks and the Derby, as you say, on this time of the year, it was very early this year, wasn't it? You know, the very end of May, very beginning of June, literally. It can't be run any earlier, and 3-year-old horses are only just coming to hand really midway through their third year. They're only at full maturity midway through their third year. So although the best horse, of course, wins the race on the day, there must be an awful lot of horses who have comparable ability who just don't get to the race.
The ownership of property in this particular jurisdiction is not pretty straightforward as it would be in London, for example, because there are certain parts of the Constitution that protect the land, and of course it's an economic viability to have properties sold for commercial gain as opposed to keeping them in the racing environment. How does it really work, Simon?
Well, effectively, if you had a new unit built from which racehorse training was operating, you would only be given permission to have that built in extremely certain circumstances, particularly if it was on the green belt. And if that was the case, it would have a covenant attached to it. And any refurbishment in the last 15 years of existing stables and any development of existing stables has had a covenant attached to it which says along the lines of only the business of training racehorses can be done from this site as a business entity. And so whilst the place could be used for normal residential, you couldn't run any business from it other than racehorse training. Obviously, to run a racehorse training business, you've got to be a licensed trainer, and that means you have to have the appropriate accreditation by the British authorities.
Simon, looking out of my window at the Holiday Inn Express, which is probably the most strategically positioned hotel I can ever think of, I can see your horses arriving back from work and departing the track. And I know that it's very difficult to cross that busy road where people are ostensibly quite horse-friendly, but you still have to wait for the light to change. And for that reason, I know that you have mooted the fact that you're looking at alternative premises in the immediate vicinity, probably the most steeped in history of all the properties, formerly belonging to Lord Derby. So tell us about your dream of occupying this property.
Absolutely, yes. Well, you know, I've made no secret of the fact that Downs House, which is probably the oldest training stables on Epsom Downs, is council-owned and is on the market. It's situated in the most wonderful position possible, really, right in the heart of Epsom Downs, just adjacent to the Derby start, and it's a 10-acre property with currently 42 boxes and a big 5-bedroomed house with flats, etc. It's absolutely perfect site to be a training centre, but also vitally important to the health and wealth of the Downs and the local area. That is the business that operates from there, because the incumbents or the occupants will be the natural guardians of the Downs. They will be the people who are living, residing and looking after, even without realising the safety of the peripheral area, which is Epsom Downs. They will be the only residents on Epsom Downs. Where we are now, yes, I think it has, as I say, with the urbanisation of the area, with us being about as peripheral as you probably can afford to be or can bear to be, has its own strengths and disadvantages. As you know yourself from spending time there over the last couple of days, the views are really panoramic, and we have the grandstand behind us. We're very high. It's a very airy, very healthy spot for horses to be, and they literally are looking out over Wembley, up the Wembley Arch and the historical London skyline. We can see right round to Canary Wharf and back to the West End. Having said that, it is an increasingly busy road to cross, and the traffic activity around the grandstand it has intensified, and you know, although I would like to move because it would, would suit me to move because it will round my career nicely. So it's a stables I spent some time at when I was much younger, and I feel that, you know, I've been here 20 years. It's about time to do something different.
I guess that the element of irony is significant, that your name is Simon Down. Downs House is the property that you wish to occupy. But I suppose more than anything else, with a complement of 20 or 25 horses now, the opportunity exists to expand your operation and to acquire new patrons from outside, which will obviously make it more economically viable than it currently is at the moment. And of course, we all know that the consequence of coincidence is sometimes the most powerful force on the planet.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, my father was a bank manager, and his view on racehorse training was that it was an extremely precarious business, and one would have to be bonkers to get involved. And I think certainly the longer that I've been involved in horse racing, the more credence his views have held to me. And as a financial package, particularly in the circumstances that a lot of people find themselves in 2013 all over the world, keeping a business like this running financially soundly is a challenge and is not straightforward. And yes, of course, the question comes, can you make yourself more financially secure by becoming bigger? Can you make yourself more financially secure by staying in with a small team with less liabilities? But you're quite right in as much as the attraction of Downs House is the massive leap up in attraction that the location has, because whilst where I am is extremely functional, it suits though, it's very healthy for the horses, and for all the reasons that I've already outlined, this has a certain grandeur, a certain style, and as having done sort of 15 years as a conservator on the Downs myself, representing the levy board and the trainers, I found myself very passionately interested, and I have a vested interest in the health of the area, and particularly the Downs themselves.
Simon, obviously time doesn't really permit us to go through each and every horse in your yard, but the one filly that I find particularly intriguing is the filly that came so close to stardom in last year's Investec Dash, when she led almost to the wire but was snared right in the shadow of the post in the closing stages. And of course it doesn't really compare to winning the Oaks or the Derby, but nothing quite like winning a race on Derby Day. And this little filly, Fair Value, as you've said before, not exactly an oil painting, but clearly got speed to burn, a lot of heart, and we'd like to know what's left in the tank with her.
Yes, it was an amazingly exciting day. Fair Value was owned and bred locally by a guy called Edward Hyde, who had horses in training, and a great fellow. And he had horses with my colleague Brooke Sanders, who's now retired. And when Brooke retired, she recommended that I could perhaps train this particular filly. She's not an oil painting, but she's extremely honest. She's got amazing speed, and she's always trained very, very well. This filly is really very effective when she's rattling. I don't think any horse really loves firm ground, but some horses go on it and some horses don't. And she has shown a marked preference for fast ground because she's got so much speed if she's allowed to rip. And I think we're probably just a little unlucky that we didn't have the weather that we've had this week. Last week, and that sort of goes back to the fact that under normal circumstances in England, although we've had a pretty rotten winter, and as you know yourselves, the recent daytime temperatures haven't been great, although we're sitting here in nice sunshine today. It's just a week too soon for us.
Fair Value leads now to Captain Dunn, entering the final furlong. Fair Value about a length clear of Captain Dunn, then La Fortunata, Giraffe, Dinkum Diamonds running on well, Smooth Talking Lies, Duke of Frenzy is dashing at them as well under Ryan Moore, and Duke of Frenzy snatches it, and it all changed in the final 50 because Smooth Talking Rascal was also flying.
Absolutely unbelievable. Now, having had the opportunity to see all the things that you do as a trainer, riding out in the morning, grooming your horses, mucking out your admin, communication, veterinary work, all that sort of stuff, kinesiology, chiropractic, it certainly adds a lot of credence to those people who want personal attention for their particular horse in your yard.
Yeah, I mean, I think, given that I've got so much experience, I've been doing it for a very long time, we've trained 600 winners of all sort of varying different standards, some of them internationally. Having said that, the reason I have to do all those things at the moment is as much as anything because of the economic climate in the UK. But at the same time, it's reminded me in the way that I currently conduct my business of the importance of attention to detail, and the fact that, as you say, I'm probably using this period of my life, I'm not sure whether in 10 years' time, Andrew, I'm still going to be riding 6 lots out in the morning, but
Father Time catches up with you.
Father Time catches up with all of us, but at the moment I'm enjoying it, and I'm finding that the experience that I've got is of huge benefit, and I'm still learning. I think, that's the most important thing, that each day, what is as fascinating as anything about these animals is that every single one of them teaches you something new.